Yo, welcome to Six Layers, the comic interview show, period. I'm Mike the Six Layer, chilling with Mark the Honorable Villain. What up, fam?
What's up, Mike? I'm pumped, man. We have another great writer with us today, our third in our series of Horizon Experiment creators. Let them know who we got, man.
That is right. We have writer and producer of Motherfucking Monsters, Jay Holtham, joining us. But before we chop it up with Jay, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and please comment. All right, our next guest is the writer of Bishop Ward College and Night Thrasher. He was also a writer and producer on the CW's Supergirl series and a writer on Marvel's Jessica Jones and Cloak and Dagger. Ladies and gentlemen of the Stash Land, we bring to you writer and producer Jay Holtham. What up, my man?
What up? Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you for joining us for the first time. Jay, we're going to just dive right on in.
Let's do it.
Okay, so since it's your first time joining us, Jay, we like to get our guests comic book origin story. In other words, we like to get you how you got your first gig in pro comics. We know you got a significant resume in film and television, but we wanted to start with how'd you get your first pro gig in comics?
My journey into comics was a little funky, as they always are. As Mark Bernardin likes to say, breaking into comics is like breaking out of prison. Everyone finds their own way, and then they close up that hole immediately after. I started weirdly through podcasts. So obviously, as you mentioned, I worked on Jessica Jones and Cloak and Dagger. I had some friends in the Marvel camp, and one of them, Ellie Pyle, was doing podcasts and asked me to write on the Wastelanders Hawkeye podcast, Old Man Hawkeye. And from there, I met some editors and things, and I think my first stuff was all digital. I was all Marvel Unlimited. I did a few runs of Miles Morales, Spider-Verse Unlimited, and some Venom Unlimited, and that was really cool and fun. And then I eventually got to do an actual book. I did a short story for Marvel's Legacy for Sam Wilson's Captain America, and yeah, that was my first. Those were my first paid gigs.
Who gave you that call that said, "Hey, this project would be good for you, Jay"?
It was Angelique Roche.
Angelique, a former guest on the show. Okay.
Exactly. She was running all the diversity stuff over there and just killing it. And yeah, I'd met her doing the podcast when I was promoting Old Man Hawkeye. She liked me and hooked me up on Marvel's Legacy. Marvel's Voices Legacy.
Shout out to Angelique. She's great. She's great. Okay, so let's move on to your work in television. You written and produced over 30 episodes of Supergirl, and that's one of our household favorites. My son and I. So I'm a big DC fan, big DC nut, and so it started with the Flash, and then it's kind of just rabbit hole from there. But we want to get what was your responsibilities on the set of Supergirl, and then if you can briefly explain what do producers generally do on the set?
Sure. Mostly I was writing. That was my main responsibility. I was in the writer's room for Supergirl for the last two seasons, for season 5 and 6. And so it was like pitching episodes, breaking episodes, and eventually writing episodes. I think I wrote a total of 7 episodes, or co-wrote a total of 7 episodes over those 2 years, maybe more. I don't think it was less. It was a lot. Network TV is a lot. It's a real sort of not grind, but it hits you fast and keeps on coming. You're writing and producing episodes and then going off. And when I'm producing, I get to go to set and be on set with the actors and the director, there to basically make sure they're hitting all the notes that we need to hit. They're obviously all great professionals. They know how to do their job, but a lot of the directors are just coming in for 1 or 2 episodes, so they don't really understand the flow of the season. The actors are usually only a script or 2 ahead as well, so they don't understand the flow of the season and what's going on and what's going to be important. So that's what I'm there, and just to be there to make the episode happen and to do rewrites when we need them. Once you're on set, everything changes. You lose locations, you lose actors. There are technical things you wrote in it that the tech people are like, we could do that, it would cost $1 million, but we could do that. And then my boss says, well, we don't have $1 million, so fix it so it doesn't cost $1 million. And that's great. It's just the best time to be there. It's just, I love set. It's such a blast.
Jay, can you tell us what came first? Your desire to write for comics or your desire to write for television and movies?
I mean, are we just talking desire? Comics
Yes,
first.
desire, yeah.
Comics first, absolutely. Before I even really understood that people could make livings writing TV or films, I was reading comics. I've been reading comics since I was like 6 or 7, really got into it when I was like 10. And I think my friends and I, back in my little town in Jersey, where I went to junior high and high school, I think we tried to create our first comic when I was like 13. It was not good. It did not go very far. We did get a lot done. It was right around the time that the Marvel Handbook came out, and so we handled that part. We had lots of backstory, lots of power descriptions, all of that. Stories, not so much.
Well, Jay, you're our first guest to write for both Marvel and DC shows. Mm-hmm. Can you share with us your work responsibilities differing between Supergirl and Jessica Jones?
I mean, there wasn't that much different in terms of the work. I mean, that's the thing about writing TV, is that it's all kind of writing for TV, and it's all sort of the same thing. DC is certainly a little more lax when it comes to the security. Marvel, super locked down. We had code names for all the shows. I still have a 10-digit password on my phone, which their security required. Like, all of that kind of stuff was much more stringent at Marvel. And also because, there are less shows, less episodes. There's a lot more they could control, as opposed to, like I said, 20 some odd episodes a year on Supergirl. You lose the ability to control quite as much.
All right, so we're going to jump back to comics and Marvel comics. I'm mostly a DC guy, and apparently, a lot of the homies give me a lot of slack for being a DC guy, whatever. No. But I want to get a little Marvel knowledge from you, more specifically Night Thrasher, because you've written that, and I was having a hard time wrapping my head around that character. Explain Night Thrasher as a character to you, and how can we interpret Night Thrasher?
Night Thrasher is super fun. He is, as a proud Gen Xer here, I love and miss the 90s, and he is the most 90s of superheroes, I think, available. Like, literally, he was created because I forget which editor was at the newsstand and saw Thrasher magazine and thought, we should have a skateboard dude. And they just created a skateboard dude who's kind of like Batman. He's rich. He dresses up in a suit. He goes around, does the vigilante thing. But the thing I like and I thought is interesting is that he's a rich black guy. And that is rare, if not almost unheard of. And so I really, he's always been an interesting character to me and always fascinating because, I like a little kitsch. I like a little camp. So, a guy running around on a rocket-powered skateboard is pretty fun. But he has this weird, tragic Marvel history in that he was the leader of the New Warriors. And so that was, a big 90s group, brought us Squirrel Girl, there was Speedball, there was all of this going on, but they are also...
Wow.
Speedball, yeah, exactly. They're also inadvertently responsible for Marvel Civil War because it was the New Warriors going after, I forget, some low-level... Nitro. That caused the explosion that blew up a town in Connecticut, killed all of them, and then sparked the original Civil War. And after that, it was not the 90s anymore. Skateboards, not as cool. Sorry, Tony Hawk. And so they kind of let the character just hang out in limbo until a few years back. They've slowly over time brought back almost, if not all, of the original New Warriors have all come back to life. And at a certain point in the mid 2010s, they brought back Night Thrasher and then just kind of forgot they had him. And he just kind of disappeared. He popped up in a couple of little places and then just gone. And he has this very complicated backstory that involves the Vietnam War and demons and all of this stuff that they just were like, nah, we're never going to deal with that ever again. And so it was really fun when they were like, we want to bring him back. I was like, cool, let me get in on this, and let me try to have some fun with it.
Jay, I want to take a step back and ask you about your digital first books. Like you mentioned Spider-Verse, The Edge of Venomverse, and Marvel Voices. Does your writing process change while working in the digital format?
Not exactly. In digital, because it's, webtoon style, so it's one long scroll. I mean, that allowed for me to do some fun things. Like I did an issue of Marvel Voices Unlimited that was Prowler and Misty Knight having a fight in an elevator. And that was really cool, and just making use of that. So it's just really just orienting your brain to that. It did take a little while to really process vertical storytelling and webtoon storytelling in that way. But it was also as I was learning how to write comics. So that was it was all a big learning curve.
I want to ask more about your writing process. What's the difference between writing a television script and a comic book script? We assume they're about the same, but we know there's probably major differences.
They start in about the same place. For me, it always does start with character and story and theme and what do I want to tell. And then at that point, I'll try to think about what's the best way to tell that story. And then sometimes there are stories, because there are things that you can do in print that would work that you cannot do in live action. Or that would be incredibly hard to do in live action, or incredibly expensive. That's a lot easier to do there. The biggest difference comes in the actual writing, because, when you're writing for a comic book, you got to think in panels. I like to think of them as slices of time. And so just sort of a snapshot of this moment, and think about what a person can be saying in this one moment, what a person can be doing, what does that look like, getting that into my brain, and then communicating that to an artist. That's a whole different sort of brain gymnasium than doing TV or film, where I'm still communicating to other artists, but it gets to be much more vague. It gets to be much more like the director, they're all going to figure this out, and it'll be a moving thing. But like with art, I've got to either be okay with them coming up with whatever, or be very specific, particularly about emotions and sort of staging, so that the artist has an idea of what the hell they're doing.
Yeah. Okay.
We just interviewed, I want to get his name right, Saber Prasada.
Yep.
Saber Prasada, I got it right. And we just interviewed him, and it's such a cool guy. And he was our first interview of anyone MCU related, because he was doing the Moon Knight, and the Miss Marvel and all that. But you guys have the Horizon experiment in common. And we also interviewed Porn Shack, P. Show, and all that. But I want to talk about Motherfucking Monsters. Love the title. I think it's really cool. How'd you get involved? Where did you get the story concept from? Tell us about it a little bit.
I mean, I love horror. I love horror since I was a kid. Sam Raimi, John Carpenter, Wes Craven, like those are the movies that really impacted me growing up. In some ways, the schlockier the better. So I've always wanted to explore more in that space. And as an Evil Dead fan, Evil Dead is probably my favorite, or like my top 3 favorite franchises ever. Always down to watch an Evil Dead movie of any kind. So it's like trying to bounce around ideas in that space in my head. And then Pornsack approached me about doing Horizon, and I was like, this is a perfect place for that. And ironically, the title sort of comes first, in that, like, it's just, we're gonna fight some motherfucking monsters, and then it all sort of spun out of there, and really trying to, like, both not exactly honor, but be tied to sort of the classic horror tropes and the classic horror situations, but giving it a very different, very particularly black spin, and a very 2020, I mean, at the time, I think it was 2023 when we started this, a very 21st century vibe to the whole thing.
Okay, so I was really excited to find out in this interview that you're a big comic book fan, that you grew up and you actually wrote a story, collab with the homies growing up at junior high in Jersey. That's dope. Okay, so this question is important to me then. name some comic book creators. It could be writers, it could be artists. Like who comes to mind when you think about influential creators to you, Jay Holtham?
Oh man, Claremont. I was the X-Men and New Mutants, where that was the whole thing. And in that same vein, John Byrne.
Right.
I would read anything John Byrne wrote, or especially anything John Byrne drew, but anything John Byrne wrote, read it all. Bill Sienkiewicz, that art really blew my mind. Frank Miller, obvi, but particularly the Daredevil Frank Miller,
Right.
and Dark Knight Returns. Those are probably the big ones. There's a little Louise Simonson. I was reminded of Louise Simonson run on X Factor with the unfortunate passing of Jackson Geiss. So I was like, oh yeah, and those were really, she was great and really important. So that was the the Peter David, those years, those Marvel years, and the post-crisis DC years. That was a good time.
Yeah, I like to. You get me excited. I'm thinking about from the DC side. You said post-crisis, so I'm thinking about when John Byrne left Marvel and then went to DC and was doing all the Superman stuff, and Darkseid was all involved. That was cool.
Yep, that Man of Steel is definitely, honestly, one of the most influential books I ever read. Like, just everything that I love about Superman, I love from that run. I was just referencing it the other day because I was talking to a bunch of friends of mine about Lenny Kravitz's workout routine and how chaotic it was. And apparently he does things with like 5-pound weights. And I was like, that reminds me, and he doesn't seem to be aware of how much anything weighs, or like, you really think he gets that physique from 5-pound like wrist weights. And I was just reminded of that bit where Lois Lane is at Clark's apartment for the first time and she tries his weight. She's like, how do you get pumped like you are from these? He's like, oh, what is 5 pounds to Superman? He has no idea. I was like, so like I said, it's burrowed deep inside me.
Jay, we're on our very last question.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that we haven't talked about that you want the supporters to know about? Any upcoming appearances, any new projects?
Nothing official yet, but definitely pick up the Horizon Experiment trade. And there's a QR code in there for you to vote, or an email or something. So vote, so I get to tell the rest of the story. Because unlike everyone else, I did not understand the assignment, and I wrote a cliffhanger instead of a one shot. So if you want to know more, you're gonna have to ask for more.
I do like that ending. This is some bullshit.
Exactly.
Well, Jay, thank you so much for joining us, man. This was great. Just know you always have a home here on the 6 Layer Station, brother.
Thank you. I'll be happy to come back. Thanks so much for having me.
No problem. Well, that's all for our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe and hit the like button. This is 6 Layers. I'm Mike, speaking for Mark and Jay Holtham. We are out. Peace.
6 Layers.